Yeah, hey, uh, come on. Hitting new levels of come on the bezel, the nine on the iron, the rock heavy metal. What? Yeah. Hitting new levels of come on the bezel, the nine on the iron, the rock heavy metal. Whoa, hey, yeah, yeah. Hitting new levels of come on the bezel, the nine on the iron, the rock heavy metal. Whoa, hey, yeah, yeah, hey. Hitting new levels will come on the bezel, the nine on the iron, the rock heavy metal, the fire and the power. I grind by the hour, we working on building the whole them in power. The signs and the stars, mine is on Mars. Nigga like Tesla, lightning bars. Ain't down broke, man, I'ma go hard. Need a big house, big watch, big car. Need a big house, big watch, big car. Need a big bang, man, need to go yard. Living high fashion in the last days. I don't give a damn, man, let him eat cake. I don't give a damn what a hater gon' say. Hard to see an asshole got a fool getting paid. Getting revenue every time, make a wave. Red up like the water, cause we making these waves. Red up like the water with a gang like slaughter. Really on my mind, live, I be round high. Laughing to the bank while I'm stacking all these dollars. Getting real high while I'm pulling on this lullaby. Putting numbers on the board like it was a aha. Praying to the pancake like it was a aha. Got the studio doing numbers like a trap house. In the backwoods, bending corners with a strap out. Hitting new levels will come on the bezel, the nine on the iron, the rock heavy metal, the fire and the power. I grind by the hour, we working on building a whole damn empire. The signs and the stars, mine is on Mars. Nigga like Tesla, lightning bars. Ain't down broke, man, I'ma go hard. Need a big house, big watch, big car.
All right. What's up, everybody? Good morning. Well, it's morning time for me. So today is not a what I've learned from reading this book. That's actually going to be tomorrow at 7 p.m. Eastern. And it's going to be the Egyptian Book of the Dead that I have right over there. But today, what I want to do is I want to talk about basically the Anunnaki. Now, I'm writing my second book now. It's going to be based on the Anunnaki. And this is just going to be a PowerPoint slide that I've already created and went over one time before. But of course, I updated some stuff to, help out, people who were asking me some questions about it because some people actually watched the episode and they was like, oh, yo, I got some questions. I was like, okay, yeah, I can help you out with that. So that's exactly what I did. And I titled it "The Anunnaki, the Gods from Around the World" because a lot of people think that, all the gods from around the world happen to be some type of Anunnaki. From the Greeks, the Egyptians to Mesoamerica, the Elohim. Some people just believe the Anunnaki and the Elohim and all these other gods are one and the same. So that's why I titled it that. And Sumer is basically the place where the Sumerians are from. Sumer is named after the Sumerians, but there was a group of people before the Sumerians who inhabited that land, and they were the Ubadians. But as far as maps, depending on which one you want to go off of, it's going to say Sumer. But if you go back before that, just because some people believe that the Sumerians and the Ubadians were two different groups of people, you will probably see a map sometime in the near future that has something like that. I don't know. Maybe, hopefully, you never know. But as far as right now, uh, the Sumerians are the uh, top dogs for that area. Um, what's so interesting about the Sumerians is that a lot of people believe about the Anunnaki being extraterrestrials, and I'll get into that later on. But everybody that wants to learn anything about the Anunnaki / Anuna, now let me make this very clear. You can go to a free website, which is the Electronic Text Corpus of Sumerian Literature, or you can buy the book version, which is the same exact thing as the website, minus, with some of the stuff that the website has, like with the, added links and so on and so forth. The book just sticks primarily to the text and stuff. But you can get the book version, which is the literature of ancient Sumer. Okay. And you can see that I have a lot of tabs on there. But when it comes to the Anunnaki, the idea is that they were a group of individuals who were extraterrestrials or individuals who were not from this planet that were, some type of gods, right? And most people get their information right now from Zachariah Sitchin. He's the top dog with that when it comes to them being extraterrestrials coming from a different planet. David Icke sometimes, talks about the reptilians and stuff like that. And a lot of people like to throw that in there. Giorgio Tsoukalos, most people know him because of the Ancient Alien show. Graham Hancock, the guy that's always asking about civilization, or talking about an advanced civilization. And then Anton Parks, I threw him in there because you'll see at the end of the show why I threw him in there. But a lot of people don't know about Samuel Noah Kramer, Thorga Jacobson, John Botero, Jeremy Black, and Dr. Michael S. Heiser. Now, there's more than this name right here that are academic scholars on the subject who can translate it and stuff like that. But this is, the academics, the scholars, or that's what some people like to call them, the people with the PhDs in some cases, and so on and so forth. Not everybody, of course, but for the most part, like Dr. Michael S. Heiser. Jeremy Black is actually one of the contributors to the electronic text corpus of Sumerian literature and the book. There is about a few different contributors to the book version, which are the same exact people who did have the information from the electronic text corpus of Sumerian literature. So these two sources are like the top dog when you want to come to something having in your hand. And when I say it in your hand, you don't have to buy a book and you don't have to spend your money to get it. Just go to the website. Just type in ETCSL, or the electronic text corpus of Sumerian literature, and you'll find it easily. So you don't even have to spend no money. That's available to everybody on the subject. But the problem is you got to be careful about how you search for things. So I always say the Anunna/Anunnaki or Anunnaki/Anunna, depending on how I want to word it. But if you type in the simple search box Anunnaki, nothing will come up. And then that's where a couple of people will get the idea that, they are trying to hide information and blah, blah, blah. But they're actually not. The thing is you have to type in Anunna, Anuna, and that will bring up the actual text that pertains to the Anunna/Anunnaki. Then you have the word list, assign list, and full catalog on all that stuff. So yeah, you just got to be careful and know what to call it and who these gods are and stuff like that. So you have to just be careful. George Smith, Andrew George, and Irving Finkel, those are more scholars and people who were able to translate the text and stuff like that. But out of all these people, right now, because Zachariah Sitchin is no longer with us, he is a guy that actually got the ball rolling, and Billy Carson now takes that and goes with it. And I can tell you what's interesting is that I actually read all Zachariah Sitchin's books, and I try to cross-reference everything he said to make sure that I understand it correctly, because I just don't want to just read something and be like, oh, okay, that's the facts. No, I want to know where you got your information from. And unfortunately, in a lot of cases, Zachariah Sitchin wasn't able to provide his facts. And I'll get into all that in a minute. But just like right here, I gave a little, idea of who these guys are. George Smith was a self-taught English Assyriologist. Andrew George was a British Assyriologist and academic, best known for his edition and translation of the Epic of Gilgamesh. And I believe I already went over that book, my series, What I've Learned from Reading This Book, on my YouTube channel, if you're watching me from somewhere else. But what's so funny about this is that Dr. Michael S. Heiser, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the fifth one from the top, he's a linguist, a theologian, but he actually has a website called Sitchin is Wrong. So he literally was so upset with Zachariah Sitchin giving out incorrect information that he actually created a website, which is still available to this day. I'm not sure how long it's going to be available, because he did pass away. Rest in peace. But, while it's still up, grab the information as much as you can. And I'll go over some of the stuff that I have already from there. I took a lot of screenshots and stuff like that. But he made a website called Sitchin is Wrong. That's how mad he was to he went and created that website. Now I'm gonna say this, you know how mad you have to be to go over there and just be like, yo, I'm gonna put this dude's name on there and I'm gonna say it's wrong. And I'm gonna tell you what's so funny is how I found this website. So I was trying to cross-reference everything Zachariah Sitchin said. And the very first thing that I did was, let me go to Google, right? Everybody goes to the website. Including myself, I always go to the websites and stuff. I do have a lot of books, but I like to, go to the website, see if I can find the quick information, especially if I know it well enough. Well, the first thing that I did was, let me see what the internet says about Zachariah Sitchin. So I just typed in Google, Sitchin is Wrong. And literally this website popped up. And it was Dr. Michael S. Heiser's website. And I pulled it up and I was like, oh, dude, dang, this dude is he got a PhD, he can translate the text. And then I also learned after following both of them, of course, I learned that Dr. Michael S. Heiser asked Zachariah Sitchin for a debate, but it never happened, of course. I'm not sure why. I'm not going to speak on the dead, but I can just tell you like this. Me personally, I like to have debates. If there's a good mediator between us two, I can have a great debate because I love them, because it just shows that, okay, what level of research did you go? You know what I'm saying? Because everybody want to talk about how they went down the wrong rabbit hole. Well, sometimes you got to figure out, was it really a rabbit hole in the first place? Could have been in a mole, could have been anything. You know what I'm saying? So why you think it's just a rabbit hole? You know what I'm saying? Do you even know what a rabbit hole really look like? You know what I mean? So, you know what I'm saying? I always try to think outside the box. But this is one of my favorite websites right here, the Cuneiform Digital Library of Initiative. It's the CDLI. That's what I call it. This is very hard to navigate also, because you have to have so much information about it before you can just go in there and look for it. It's very confusing. So what I'd like to do is, if I'm looking for a tablet for a specific thing after I'm reading a book or something like that, I'll type in that tablet name and whatever they say it is in the book, and then I'll type in CDLI, and that it usually will come up. Good example is if you type in the Gilgamesh, the Epic of Gilgamesh in there tablet on Google, it'll give you different links, and this will be one of the tablets you'll probably find, and it'll tell you exactly where it's at and all this other stuff. So you can read it. It'll have multiple photos so you can see it and stuff like that. It'll tell you the time period that it was written and stuff like that. And that's very important. The reason why that's very important is because a lot of people think that what happened in the Chaldeans and the Babylonians, that's what the Sumerians did, right? Or that's what they believed. And that's not always the case. Each one of them added on to the story of the Anunnaki and stuff like that. Sometimes even the stories even changed, but this is one of my favorite websites, CDLI. So those two sources that I gave out earlier, the ETCSL and the book version, right? So, okay, so I'm going to read these 2 points because this comes from the actual sources. So this is according to the literature of ancient Sumer. These translations of Sumerian literature constitute the most comprehensive collection ever published of the world's earliest literature. The composition in this book were mainly inscribed on clay tablets dating to the 18th century BC, 1800 to 1701 BC. And that's on the back of the book. That's what it says on the back of the book. When you go to the website itself, there'll be a little box that pops up, and it'll be some writing in there. And it'll say, according to the ETCSL, Sumerian is the first language for which we have written evidence and its literature, the earliest known. The electronic text corpus of Sumerian literature, ETCSL, a project of the University of Oxford, comprises a selection of nearly 400 literary compositions recorded on sources which come from ancient Mesopotamia, modern Iraq, and date to the late 3rd and early 2nd millennium BCE. And that just tells you 2300 BC to 1700 BC, and it tells you that in it. So you can see how the dates are give and take for the exact same source, but different type of source. One versus online, one versus the book version. So that's why I always say be careful about the time frame and which time frame you pick, because I've read plenty of times where an online version would be different than a book version. But I took a class from Dr. Nili Summit from Bar Ilan University, and she said the origins of Sumerian writing developed around 3200 BC in southern Mesopotamia, and it was created for practical uses like for economic purposes and stuff like that. Early examples were simple pictographs for keeping trade records, grain, rations, livestock, tax receipts, stuff like that. So basically a tool for commerce and administration only. That's what the Sumerian writing system was written as. Now they did have gods and believed in the gods because of course they were called the Anuna, but that was more of an oral tradition, and I'll get into that in a second. Evolution of Sumerian writing gradually became a fully developed language capable of expressing complex ideas. Expanded uses included trade and legal matters, religious texts, hymns, myths, and temple rituals. Writing eventually used to discuss the divine. So that was after it gradually developed, right? Now this is where it's going to start making sense. Transition to Akkadian. So Akkadian, a Semitic language, adopted the Sumerian cuneiform script. Now this is important, right? Even though the Akkadians adopted the Sumerian cuneiform script, the Sumerians had to adopt the Akkadian cuneiform script because they both had different types of scripts, very similar but different in some ways. This is important because, and even in my book, I write that the Sumerians are considered the first civilization because of their writing system and their because of the pictographic script, which is accurate from Dr. Nili Summit from Bar Ilan University and other sources, of course, even if you want to go with the ancient alien theories, right? But the thing is that the Sumerians were trading. Their writing system developed because of trading. Well, if they were trading with somebody, then that other peak group of people had to have a type of writing system, which were Akkadians, of course, so that way they could trade their goods with the Sumerians. So in reality, could the Sumerians and the Akkadians had the same civilization? And that's why I always say, ask at least, what is the criteria that is needed to be considered a civilization? Because is it writing? Is it pictographic scripts? Is it, what is it? Is it buildings? Is it gods? And I'll get into that in a second. By around 2000 BC, Akkadian became the dominant language of Mesopotamia, and that was because of Sargon of Akkad. Used for a wide range of topics, including law, science, mythology, and theology. So just think about that, of course. When you start having trade, what do you have? You have people that's going to do what? Possibly rob them traders, especially if they're hungry, right? Well, now you got to create some type of law to write down what's going to happen if these people get caught, right? Before it was just an, word for word type thing, but now we're going to start doing this. But let me get back into this. The Akkadian emphasis on religion placed greater focus on divine narratives and cosmology, produced famous religious works such as the Epic of Gilgamesh and the Enuma Elish, became the primary language for communication with and about the gods in the official and literary context. So basically, the Sumerians started with trade, later included religion, and then Akkadians inherited the system, placed strong emphasis on mythology and theology. So basically, the Sumerians had the trade aspect, right? And then the Akkadians had, we're going to write about our gods. So maybe that's because that was important to them, right? So that's what you have right there. It's just a matter of what you consider a civilization, you know what I'm saying? So that's important. The earliest known use of the noun Sumerologist is in the 1880s, and I put that in there because, like I said, I know about ancient aliens. I actually have the book from the Ancient Alien Show, which is based off the first episode and stuff. And in the book, it says that Samuel Noah Kramer is known as the first Sumerologist or something roundabout like that. So I looked it up, and I just want to say it goes back to the 1880s, and I just wanted to put that in there. And this is an example of what a cuneiform tablet would look like. In most cases, it wouldn't even be that big where you could put it in your hand and be much smaller than that. The Sumerians are usually known as the black-headed people, Sagiga, Giga. I don't know how to say it correctly, but often meaning all humans, mankind, in some cases that I've learned, brothers. So when you think about Freemasonry and all that other stuff, you know, the Knights Templar and all that, and how they got a brotherhood of some sort, I've read that the Sumerians were considered themselves as brothers. So the Anunnaki were a group of major deities in Sumerian mythology and all around Mesopotamia. They were believed to be descendants of the god An or Anu. Now, what's interesting is that, and I'll show more into it when I get into more into this slide, showed that Zachariah Sitchin has like 3 or 4 different ways that Anunnaki, what Anunnaki means, meaning like those who came from heaven to earth or something like that. I'll get into that in a minute. But the Anunnaki are known as judges and controllers of human fate. That's actually in the text. They control human fate in so many different ways, and they judged in different ways also. Each Sumerian state had their own specific god. So not every city state believed in the same god. They knew of all of them, but their main god was their main god, whoever it was. Like York, it was Inanna, and Nippur, it was Enlil, and Eridu was Enki. And sometimes it was different places depending on, those weren't always the at one places either. Some of them times I've heard that they were in different places and stuff like that, just depending on the time frame. But these stories are influenced all throughout Mesopotamian traditions and cultures, you know, like the Akkadian, Babylonian, Assyrians, and so on and so forth. Now, this is where it gets into it about the Anunnaki, the Anunna. And this is where, this is how you can tell when somebody has did their due diligence and their research. All right, the Anunna are credited for the creation of the universe and everything within it. Depending on whether it was the Sumerians or the Babylonians, the myths about them are found throughout Mesopotamia. And I have in here exactly what the Akitu festival is, and that's about, and I will get into that. That's going to be a whole reading right there. But the Nuna gods were known for creating a substitute to relieve the Igigi or Igigi, I heard it said different ways, of toiling the earth. According to the literature of ancient Sumer, the Igigi is also a collective name for the great gods, and the Nuna Anunnaki is a collective name for the gods. So what that means is the Igigi, even though they were toiling the earth, their title or representation was that they were their name, that name specifically was for the great gods. And the Anunnaki is a collective name for the gods. So you had a collective name of gods like the Elohim, and then you had Anuna, who were the Igigi were the great gods over, the other gods. In early Mesopotamian cosmology, the Anunna were seen as the first generation of gods created by the primordial deities and or Kai or Ki. I've heard it said different ways, but actually, if you look right here in the literature of ancient Sumer in the book, when you go to the back, when you finish reading the book, it literally tells you that Igigi is a collective name for the great gods, and then on the bottom, the Anunna is a collective name for the gods. That's in the book itself. I posted that on my Twitter just to share that, hey, look, the Igigi weren't considered slaves because some people believe they were considered slaves, or they were, or lesser deities, or some I've even heard that they were just workers and stuff like that. Everybody had multiple different titles for them, but or ideas what they were, but they were it was a collective name for the great gods. So that's pretty interesting to me. The top four you're always going to get is An, Anu, Enki, Enlil, and Nirhasak. And what's so interesting about An, the god that the Anunnaki come from, is that during the Amarna period in the 14th century BC, there were some Amarna letters found in Egypt were written in Akkadian cuneiform rather than Egyptian, and were used by foreign rulers and Egyptian scribes for international diplomacy. So that's pretty interesting to me. So that the Egyptians actually had text about Anu there. So obviously played a big role in there. Enki, what's interesting about Enki is, I always say this, that the guys didn't come from no planet named Nibiru that orbit our sun every 3,600 years, and they came here to mine gold on our planet, because Enki was known as a fish god or a water god of some sort. And or he, in the lesser sense, just to keep it simple, he came from the depths of the sea. So it's just interesting about them. I think I got something incorrect on here with this one right here. I have to double check this, but anyway, Enlil, Lord of Air and Authority, eventually being known as the authority god like Anu. So you know how Anu or An was the top dog. It's interesting. Now, the reason why I want to go back and check this out, because there are sometimes when people believe that in Akkadian, Enki and Enlil, their names, they were mixed up, and I get into that in a second. But Enki and Enlil weren't always known as brothers. Sometimes they were known as, one was the father, one was the son. And it's interesting because every scholar that I've read from comes with some type of contradiction to something else, where one would say this is Enki and this is Enlil, or this is Enlil, this is Enki, or they're brothers and they're not, and they're actually one is father, one is son. And even in the text, if you go to the text corpus of Sumerian literature, you will be able to read the text where one is read as one as being the father and one being the son. And then you'll read about how they're brothers in other texts. So it's just a whole mixed up idea of who they are. All right, so the Anunnaki Chronicles. All right, so what's interesting about the Anunnaki Chronicles is this is the book that I was saying about Zechariah Sitchin, where he contradicts what he says. I don't think he does it on purpose. I don't know why he does it, but I can just tell you that when his niece published this book right here, I think it went against a lot what he said. And I'll give you an example. In the book, it says the Hebrew original named them Nephilim. The teacher explained it meant giants, but I objected didn't mean literally those who were cast down, who had descended to earth. That was one way that he described Nephilim, because he also believed the Nephilim was the Anunnaki, which is interesting to me. Then here's the other one: those who came or descended to earth, and then of course from the heavens, right? That's one of them. And then another one is those who from heaven to earth came, the exact meaning of the Hebrew term Nephilim that the Bible used. Well, if you go to the Strong's Concordance, that's where you get the actual meaning, translations and stuff like that. And if you type in Nephilim, it literally means giant in the KJV. And you can go in there and read more about it and stuff like that, but it just means mostly fallen. It doesn't mean any of what Zechariah Sitchin said right there. So what's interesting about here is Cylinder COVA 243, which is what Zechariah Sitchin likes to hold up and says this is the 12th planet. Now, people say, oh, it's so accurate. Well, it's not accurate, for one, because I can't remember which one it is, but it's either the size or the shapes, the size or the location of the circles are not accurate. They can tell by just the way they did their little calculations and whatnot. But I can tell you right now, he named his book the 12th planet, right? So okay, so you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So that means that he counts the sun and the moon as a planet to come up with the 12th planet idea. Well, today I don't believe we consider Pluto a full planet. I believe it's just a dwarf planet right now, but in a sense, it has the word planet in there. So um, uh, you can go with that however you want to, but in reality, I'll tell you right now, um, you can't count the sun and the moon as a planet, even if unless unless they're telling us something we don't know. This is the cylinder seal that Zachariah Sitchin always talks about, and this is from Dr. Michael S. Heiser's website. So, according to Dr. Michael S. Heiser, this is the translations where you can see right here, red right here, and then red on here. So that's line 1, line 2 is the blue, and line 3 is the yellow. And I always like to say this to people because it's always so funny to me. I always say to people, that cylinder seal VA 243 that Zachariah Sitchin is always holding and saying that's the 12th planet. I said that has more to do with German than it does with any planet that has anything that goes around our sun every 3,600 years. And I say it because if you look right here, and this, like I said, this is from Dr. Michael S. Heiser's website. Line 1 says Dubsiga, and it's a personal name of an apparent powerful person. And line 2 is Iliat, another personal name that is the time of the seal's owner. And then line 3 is Dynect, German for your servant. So that's why I say it has more to do with German than it does with anything about planet. And then it gives you, more information on it. Like I said, just go to the website and you see it gives you a lot more information. But that's just basically what I say. I say, hey, when people say, yeah, that says the 12th planet, the first thing I say is, do you know what the cuneiform script says on there? And we're like, what are you talking about? And I said, you don't know the writing system that's on there? Do you know what it says on there? And they'll be like, no, what does it do? And I said, what if I told you it has to do with more with German than it does with Nibiru? And they'll be like, well, that doesn't change the fact of it. And I says, you're right, absolutely. But why do you think it's Nibiru? Why do you think he picked that? And he'll say, because it's 12 planet. Then my next question will be, okay, because they count the sun and the moon as a planet. And they'll be like, that's when they get their tracks stopped at, because they're thinking to themselves, wait a minute, you're right. The sun is in the planet and the moon is in the planet. And that's what's included in those up here in the left-hand corner. All right, so this is the ruins of a temple platform in Nippur, which is actually Nibiru/Nibiru. The brick structure on top was constructed by American archaeologists around 1900. So basically, we know that Nibiru/Nibiru was the place. Now, this is what's interesting. Nibiru, Nibru, is what the Sumerians called it. So when you go to electronic text corpus of Sumerian literature, you have to type in Nibru. Okay, but the Akkadians called it Nibiru, Nibiru, just like Sumerians called them the Nuna, and the Akkadians called them the Anunnaki. This is the same way for that, but this is, as you can see, it's on top of a high hill or some sort and stuff like that. And what I like to think about this is that when individuals came down from the guys that were on top of their living in their structures, they would come down and tell the people stuff. So they were considered messengers, what some people call today as angels or some sort. And then the guys lived on higher ground than most people, and that's mainly, if you really think about that, higher ground meant that less potentials of flooding. Right. So just think about that. If the guys knew that there was going to be a flood, why would they tell people? Because they could rush up the hill or mountain and get up there to safety. Right. You know what I'm saying? But why wouldn't they want that in the first place? And that's another question. But just think about that. Their land was always high on higher ground. Always. Now, this is the interesting part. This is another favorite source of mine, the Oxford Handbook of Cuneiform Culture. So this is the Oxford Handbook of the whole entire cuneiform culture. So it's just not the Sumerians, the Akkadians, or the Babylonians, or the Chaldeans, or the Assyrians. It's all of them, the Hittites, every single one of them. And this is what it says: the Kauhu Apkelu was certainly also painted in antiquity, perhaps in a very similar way to the artist's reconstruction. According to Mesopotamian tradition, these big fish are the companions of the god of wisdom, Enki/Ea, who dwells in the depths of the sea. They regularly emerge from the sea in order to teach mankind the cornerstones of civilization, such as agriculture, kingship, justice, and writing. Before the flood, in it, their coexistence. And then it tells you what to see. But this is literally coming from the Oxford Handbook of Cuneiform Culture. So when I say they came from the depths of the seas rather than some planet, some people will say, well, the universe is considered a sea. And I'll be like, you're right. And that's why you always got to be one step ahead of everybody, right? So that's when you come up here to the water, the Apsu, also called Inger or literal meaning, Ab, ocean, Zoo. Some people say it doesn't mean just ocean, but a lot of people say it's the ocean. But for the most part, it's water. So let me say that again. The Apsu, also called Inger, literal meaning Ab, ocean, Zoo, to know or deep, was the name for fresh water from underground aquifers that was given in a religious quality in Sumerian and Akkadian mythology. Lakes, springs, rivers, wells, and other sources of fresh water were thought to draw their water from the Apsu. Okay. So that's why I always say you always got to be one step ahead. And this is why I love this website right here, the Electronic Babylonian Library, EBL. This is actually a website that everybody can go to and actually look at these cuneiform tablets, look at real in-depth with how to read them and all this other stuff. And you can see right here, sign information. You can see the different signs from old Babylonian, the Hittites, Neo-Assyrians, Babylonians, the Neo-Babylonians, the Babylonian cursive. And the Apsu is basically underground water. Okay. I'm going to say that one more time. For anybody that wants to sit up here and question and say, hey, well, the universe is to consider water, and there is water in space. You're absolutely right. I'm not going to argue with that, but I can tell you what the Apsu actually meant according to the Mesopotamian cuneiform tablets, and I can tell you that it meant underground water at the depths of the seas. Okay. Now, argue with me about that. If you find that incorrect, translate the text correctly, write these individuals and let them know, hey, that's not exactly what it means. It doesn't mean Apsu. It means this. And then they can go from there, because they absolutely do take a lot of comments and suggestions. So if you think that's wrong, by all means, get it fixed and corrected, because right now, as of right now, the Anunna/the Anunnaki came from the Apsu. So, and everybody that with them came from there. They didn't come from a planet outside of Earth's atmosphere called Nibiru. This is literally facts. This is why I say I like actual facts. You don't have to go out there and buy so many books and buy everything you need to buy to get the facts. You can go to here. And like I said, if you want to fix it, by all means, write these people and let them know, and then make it where everybody can follow why what they're saying isn't correct. Because right now, I'm going to say one more time, Abzu means underground water. So the Nuna/Anunnaki came from underground water. Then you got right here the literature of ancient Sumer. The book right here says, Enlil separating heaven from the earth and linking the two at Durankai, the sacred term for Nibiru. Now that's from the title in this book, The Song of the Hoe. Now this is interesting because, like I said, when you look at where the gods or the kings or whatnot, where their residence was always on higher ground, which was considered heaven, because those were the gods. That was the higher ground. No difference than being on top of a mountain or something like that, right? And that didn't, like I already said, Nibiru is not a planet. It's actually a city, and I'll get into that right here in a few seconds. But Enlil and Ninlil, and usually the beginning of this narrative attempts to normalize a setting, location, and actors. Everything is just ordinary, and unlike many other mythical narratives, it takes place in the city of Nibiru, a real known location. So we absolutely know where Nibiru/Nibiru is at. There is no guessing. There's no ifs, ands, and buts about it. We absolutely know where it's at, and it's a real city, a real known location, and that's according to the literature of ancient Sumer. All right, and here are some of the things that is written in the literature of ancient Sumer. That says, and Nibiru-ta-lu, when translated, literally means man from the city of Nibiru. He's the man on the street. So when anybody says, yo, what's that man doing on the street? In those times, he would be called a Nibiru-ta-lu, because he's the man on the street. So just giving you some information, the man of the city of Nibiru. All right, here's another one. My Nibiru, where black birch trees grow in a good place, my sanctuary. Nibiru, where white birch trees grow in a pure place, my Nibiru shrine is built in a good place. The sanctuary, Nibiru's name is a good name. My Nibiru's shrine is built in a good place. The sanctuary, Nibiru's name is a good name. Before Dilmun or Dilmun existed, palm trees grew in my city. Before Dilmun existed, palm trees grew in Nibiru, and the great mother of Nineveh was clothed in fine linen. There was a city, the one we live in. Nibiru was the city, the one we live in. Gisnimbar was the city, the one we live in. Sala is its holy river. Karjestina is its quay. Kasar is its quay, where boats make fast. Pulang is its freshwater well. Nunbur Tum is its branching canal, and even one measures from there is cultivated land, is 50 sar each way. Enlil was one of its young men, and Nineveh was one of its young women. Nunbar Sigunu was one of its wise old women. And then here we go. This is still the literature of ancient Sumer, and this is actually, if you look on the bottom right, you can see that I actually have where it's at on the website. So here, if you look where it says 104-116 on the left corner, you can't really see it on the bottom right, but its name is numbered C.1.4, I believe. So you can see that the identifying numbers are different. And that's why it's always a good thing to know that even though you might think you have an identifying number for something else and you think that you're right, doesn't mean that it can't be different somewhere else. And this is actually the same two sources. Like I said, the ETCSL is the same exact source as the literature of ancient Sumer, exact same source. They just took what's online and put it in the book, and that's it. And it just sticks straight to the text. And this is where I was always talking. This is where I told it that I needed to check the names for that, because I always put things in there that catches my eye, so that way I can, always go back and do some more research. That's why I said I'm always going to update doing this, so that way I can have the most updated type information that I feel comfortable with. And I feel comfortable with, this is how the progression of learning about this stuff takes. In the shrine of Nibiru, Enki provided a meal for Enlil, his father. I'm going to say that again. In the shrine of Nibiru, Enki provided a meal for Enlil, his father. Okay, so that's where I always say that they're not always known as brother and sister, or brother and brother. My bad. This is on the back of the book. Nibiru, an important city and cult center in the north of Sumer, where the large majority of the manuscript sources for Sumerian literature have been found. Center of worship for the gods Enlil, Ninlil, and Narata, also known as Nippur in modern scholarship. Now, I want to make sure that everybody understands this. Most of the stuff that's found about these gods is found on the land that is considered Nibiru/Nibiru. Okay. All right. This is not a planet that orbit our sun every 3,600 years. This is actually a location in a city that is also known as Nippur for scholarship. All right. The Anunnaki are widely recognized as among the earliest recorded deities in human history, primarily due to the advanced Sumerian writing system later refined and transmitted through Akkadian, Babylonian, Assyrian, and Hittite civilizations. When analyzing religious systems and cosmologies of cultures across the ancient world, striking parallels emerged between the Anunnaki and deities from other regions, including the ancient Egyptians, the Dogon of the West Africa, the Mesoamerican civilizations, and even the Aboriginal Australians. And what's so interesting is I know an Aboriginal Australian, talked to him quite a few times. I know a couple of people from the Mesoamerican history side that talks about them. And it's just I talk to a lot of different people, so every one of them have similarities. Like I said, some people believe that Ningishzida, which is a Sumerian god from Nuna/Anunnaki, is the same as Kokukan or Quetzalcoatl or Hermes, or those. So it's just that's why I labeled it around the world and stuff like that. And then you got some of them believe Ra and Marduk is one and the same. And this is actually a list that I'm working on. I'm slowly just trying to get it right. It's basically me taking information from different books and civilizations that I read and putting together, who the Anunnaki are according to the Egyptians. Like I said, Ra and Marduk. You got Ra as Enlil. You got Ra as it's so crazy that you could put similarities on somebody and go with it and believe that they're all the same. And I'm just going off of what I've read the most, and I'm just marking them on the tab of a little book that I have. So, but this is interesting. This is why I brought on Anton Parks in here, because he's the one that actually opened my eyes up about Inky and Enlil not being brothers and always one being maybe father and son. And sometimes one being one the other and the other being the other one, and they're just getting it mixed up. And how sometimes the names can be different depending on who the moment of the context of the words. But in his book, he gives out cuneiform identifiers CBS 11065 that artisan Inky revealed the secret of metallurgy to the woman while his sons, the great messenger observers, cast metal and cohabited with her, the mother of the human race. The mother knows the secret of the guys that the tool revealed. And then he takes it and he compares it to the New American Standard Version, which is the sons God. The sons of God came in unto daughters of men, and they bare children to them, the Nephilim, which brought corruption among mankind. Azazel transmitted the secret of the gods, the knowledge of metals, to humanity, and so corrupted it. All right, and that's Genesis 6, 1-5, and then the book of Enoch, chapter 8 and 1. And here's another source that he says the knowledge of the forbidden fruit was simply that of tool making, whose secret was not to be divulged. And rabbinical views of a later period, the concept was associated with a sexual taboo because of the same time Inky incited the humans to reproduce themselves. Okay, and there's some more sources where he gives, where he believes, he can find the clay tablet sources and line them up with different parts of the Bible and stuff like that. And it had a lot to do with metallurgy, like I said. And he gives the cuneiform tablet identifiers, so that's always a good thing. But this is what I was talking about, the Keto Festival. So this is where it gets interesting. So a lot of people talk about the Enuma Elish and they'll say, oh yeah, that's the Sumerian text and stuff like that. No, that's not the Sumerian text. That's it's the Babylonian text. But because a lot of times, like I said earlier, the Sumerians, they didn't write their stuff down about gods. Their first writing system had to do with trade. They believe because they had the same they came around the same time frame, and that they are considered the oldest civilization, that everything came from the Sumerians, which is not true, right? Writing for the Akkadians started mostly with, uh, in ideas of, their gods and their history and stuff like that. But the Aikido festival, one of the most important religious ceremonies in ancient Mesopotamia, especially in Babylon, was a grand celebration of cosmic renewal, divine legitimacy, and the triumph of order over chaos, held during the month of Nisanu, March, April, around the spring of equinox. Aikido marked the Mesopotamian New Year and symbolized the rebirth of both the natural world and society. At its core, the festival honored Marduk, Babylon's chief deity, reaffirmed the king's divine mandate, and ritually reestablished harmony in the universe. The celebration lasted 12 days, and each day carried deep symbolic meaning. It began with a temple purification and recitation of sacred texts, especially the Enuma Elish, the Babylonian creation myth that tells of Marduk's victory over the chaos goddess Tiamat. In the early days of the festival, priests fasted and purified themselves while preparing the city and its temples for the divine presence. By the fifth day, a striking ritual occurred. The king was stripped of his royal garments, brought before the high priest, and slapped as a show of humility before the gods. That's crazy. If the king shed tears, it was interpreted as a good omen. The gods still favored him, and his rule was reaffirmed. So that means they had to slap him a couple of times, right? As the festival progressed, statues of gods from nearby cities were brought into Babylon, joining Marduk in a display of divine unity. Grand processions led these sacred images to Akitu Temple, located outside the city walls. Marduk was said to temporarily retreat. There, a ritual reenacted of the divine struggle unfolded. Marduk's symbolic imprisonment and eventual release mirrored his mythical triumph over Tiamat and the restoration of the cosmic order. This act not only reflected a return to stability, but also dramatized the annual renewal of the world. On the final days, the gods' statues were returned to their home temples. The king reappeared fully restored to power, and public festivities erupted across the city, complete with the offerings, music, and communal joy. The year had officially begun anew. The Akitu festival served multiple purposes. It mythologically reset the universe, marked the start of the agricultural cycle, politically legitimized the king's reign, and social reinforcement Mesopotamian cosmic hierarchy, gods above kings, kings above people. Underlying the entire festival was the recitation of the Enuma Elish, a creation myth where Marduk defeats Tiamat, creates the world from her body, becomes the king of the gods, and forms humans to serve them. All right, and this is some of the text from the TCSL. So it talks about, in the days when heaven and earth were created, and those nights, and the nights when heaven and earth were created, and those years, and the years when the fates were determined, when the Anunna gods were born, when the goddesses were taken in marriage. So this is stuff that's already in the text. What's interesting to me, though, is the debate between grain and sheep, where they talk about the holy mound. Okay, holy mound. So it was a mound before a pyramid. Okay, that's interesting to me. We got a lot of mounds here in the United States, but that's what sticks out to me. That's why I put that on there and stuff like that. So that's pretty much it. My book is actually going to be re-released in January. My publisher is going to gave me all the rights to my book, so they're going to they got some new journey that they're going on. So they're giving everybody the rights to their books. So in 5 days, it's not going to be available on Amazon, but as soon as everything's up to date and it gets off of Amazon, that day I'll be publishing it on hopefully like a couple of days right after that. So by January 1st, it definitely will be published. But you can still get your copies until then. It's just going to be a changeover. That's all it's going to be. And I'm taking off, of course, the publishing on the bottom and putting my logo right there. But you can still get my book. Just look out for that. I talk a lot about this stuff in my book. I want to just make something clear about Enlil and Enki. A lot of times, a lot of people would describe them as being the opposite. And I don't really understand that. I think it has to do with a lot of confusion. But what's really stuck out to me about them is that they're not always known as brothers, and then sometimes they're known as one is father and one is son. So I really highly recommend you to go to Electronic Text Corpus of Sumerian Literature and check that out. But that's it. I'm probably going to do this again for this book, for this thing, to add some more stuff into it, because I just want to keep doing it until the day that I get a call and say, hey, yo, I want you to present this Anunnaki, because a lot of people ask me this. This is like my go-to thing when I talk about the Anunnaki. So I always have this, and I'm always adding on to it. And there's always good questions to be asked every time I do. I think I did this once before, and I had like 10 or 15 people ask me some questions, and I actually added it into this one. So when I get some more questions like that, I'll probably be doing another one, just so that way I can add more information to it. One of them was about a good question about Enki and Enlil being brothers, because they see me post that or repost that a couple of days prior, and they asked me about that. But I appreciate everybody that came to listen. Little Vibe, check him out on Spotify. Great musician out there. Got some great music out there. So just type in Little Vibe if you got Spotify. Until next time, y'all already know what it is. Knowledge is power.